Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle.
Dear students, Rao's IS has launched its essay, mains test series and quality improvement program for 2021. Now we are all aware of the fact that essay as a paper has emerged as the rank maker in this entire scheme of things from the perspective of mains examination. And all those who score top ranks do very well in the essay paper. We also know that people pay attention to mains test series in terms of general studies paper, but they hardly pay any attention to the essay paper. Keeping this in mind, Rao's IS has launched Essay, Mains Test Series and Quality Improvement Program for 2021. The course features are as follows. First and foremost, there will be quality improvement program classes, which will be live and interactive classes. These will constitute of around 30 hours of essay writing approach and skills, and video backup for the classes will be available for 7 days. Apart from that, there will be an essay compass booklet, which will be a compilation of essays from previous year topics. Second important aspect is the test itself. Now, in this program, there will be tests which will be divided into thematic test and full length test. So, there will be 3 thematic tests and 3 full length tests in order to help you prepare for the examination in the right format. Any system of learn and test can thrive only when the review mechanism is proper. And for this particular purpose, we'll be sharing with you sample essays. There will be test discussion classes for which video backup will be available till mains 2021. Apart from that, there will be evaluation and personal mentorship available for this particular course. So, what are you waiting for? You should enroll yourself in the course as the course is starting on 8th of February 2021. For more details, visit raosis.com website or call us.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading from the UPSC Civil Services Examination perspective. Now, today we are going to discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 31st January 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So, on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our examination perspective.
Now, this particular article appears on page number 9. The article is titled as Government Plans a New Law to Ban the Bitcoin and to Set up a Official Digital Currency. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. Before discussing this particular article in much greater detail, let us first look into its background. I hope all of you must be aware, in the recent years, a large number of private cryptocurrencies have come into being. Some of these private cryptocurrencies include Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple. Apart from that, you must also be aware that Facebook has also decided to launch its own private cryptocurrency known as Libra. Now, the issuance of these private cryptocurrencies in turn poses multifaceted challenges and problems. First and foremost, these private cryptocurrencies are considered to be extremely volatile, which means the prices of these private cryptocurrencies increase or decrease within a very short span of time. Now, for example, if you look at this particular chart, this chart shows a variation of the Bitcoin in terms of the Indian currency, that is, in terms of Indian rupee. As you can see here, the present value of Bitcoin is almost around 25 lakhs. And if you see the value of Bitcoin, say around 5 years back, this was only around 25,000. So, within a matter of 5 years, the value of Bitcoin has increased by almost around 1000%. So, if a person had invested in Bitcoin 5 years back, such a person could have become a millionaire right now. But we must also understand that the prices of the Bitcoins can change overnight. Now, for example, if the countries across the world decided to put a ban on the private cryptocurrencies, then the value of the Bitcoin from 25 lakhs, it can drop down to 25,000. So overnight, a millionaire can become a pauper. Secondly, the private cryptocurrencies also poses a security risk wherein the private cryptocurrencies can be used for a number of illegal activities. Take for instance terror financing, buying of drugs, weapons, etc. on the dark net. Thirdly, they can also cause macroeconomic instability. This is so because the central bank of a country can have control over the existing paper based currencies. However, they cannot have control over these private cryptocurrencies, and thus this can cause a macroeconomic instability. In this regard, the government of India had appointed a committee under the leadership of Subhash Chandra Garg. Now, this particular committee had recommended the government of India that the government should ban the private cryptocurrencies since they cause a number of problems. And secondly, these private cryptocurrencies in turn should have to be replaced by a digital currency that should be issued by the central bank, which means in case of India, the Reserve Bank of India should issue its own digital currency. In this regard, this particular article highlights that the government of India is set to introduce a new law. The idea behind this particular law is twofold. First and foremost, it seeks to ban the private cryptocurrencies, and secondly, it seeks to put in a necessary framework to enable the Reserve Bank of India to issue the central bank digital currency. So, from the perspective of the UPSC examination, that is from the perspective of prelims, first and foremost, you should understand as to what exactly is the blockchain technology and what advantages does it offer. Now, the various aspects of the blockchain technology, including its advantages, have already been covered in our DNS dated 10th of September 2020. Hence, we will not be covering this particular part once again. Apart from this, you should also understand as to what exactly is a central bank digital currency and some of its features. As far as the mains examination is concerned, in case of mains, you should understand as to what are the advantages of the central bank digital currency over the existing private cryptocurrencies. Now, based upon a video discussion, a mains question for your practice here could be, what do you mean by the central bank digital currency? Discuss as to how its introduction can have several advantages over the existing private cryptocurrencies. So, what exactly is a central bank digital currency? The central bank digital currency is simply a digital currency that is issued by a central bank of a particular country. See, central bank in a particular country, it normally issues the currency notes, and these currency notes can in turn be used for settlement of various transactions. In similar way, the digital currencies, just like currency notes, can be used for payment of various transactions. Apart from that, whenever you are purchasing any goods and services, you will be paying for those goods and services in terms of the currency notes. So the other party is under obligation to accept these currency notes for the settlement of the transaction. So in a way, these paper-based currency notes, they are considered to be the legal tender. The other party cannot reject the currency notes for the settlement of the transactions. That is why the currency notes are referred to as the legal tender. Similarly, even the central bank digital currency, it is considered to be a legal tender and it can be used for the payment of various transactions. So what exactly are the features of the central bank digital currency? First and foremost, just like the private cryptocurrencies, the central bank digital currencies are based upon the blockchain technology. Since they are based upon the blockchain technology, the central bank of a country would be able to capture all the aspects of the transactions done through such currencies. The central bank of a country would get to know as to how much amount was paid, into which account the money was paid, and for what purpose the money was paid for settling of the transactions done to central bank digital currency. So, in a way, the central bank would be able to trace all the transactions in a country. Secondly, the central bank digital currency is backed by the central bank of a particular country. Hence, it is considered to be more stable and less volatile in comparison to the private cryptocurrencies. And the third and most important aspects of the central bank digital currency, which differs from the private cryptocurrency, is that the central bank digital currency is considered to be the programmable money. Why it is considered to be a programmable money? First and foremost, this can be programmed to operate only for the settlement of certain transactions. So the central bank digital currency can be programmed in such a manner that it cannot be used for all the types of transactions. Rather, it can be used for only certain selected transactions. It can also be programmed to operate in a specific region of a country. So based upon the programmability of the central bank digital currency, it can either be referred to as a retail central bank digital currency or a wholesale central bank digital currency. If a central bank digital currency can be used by people for their day-to-day transactions, in that case, it is referred to as the retail central bank digital currency. On the other hand, if the central bank digital currency has been programmed in such a way that it cannot be used by the people for settling their day-to-day transactions, rather, if it is programmed in such a way that it can be used only by certain financial institutions, in that particular case, it will be referred to as a wholesale central bank digital currency. Now, for example, the banks can use the wholesale central bank digital currency in order to carry out various transactions among themselves or in order to carry out the transactions with the central bank of a particular country. So, in this particular case, the central bank digital currency is not used by the people for doing the day-to-day transactions. In such case, it is referred to as a wholesale central bank digital currency. Now, presently, the central banks across the world, they are presently in a kind of race to come out with a full-fledged central bank digital currency. In fact, countries across the world have launched a central bank digital currency in a pilot mode. This means that countries have not yet launched a full-fledged central bank digital currency. Rather, they have launched such a currency in the experimental stage. So depending upon the success as well as learnings from this experimental stage, countries can then decide to launch a full-fledged central bank digital currency. Now, some of the countries that have launched the central bank digital currency include Tunisia, whose central bank digital currency is referred to as e-dinar, Ecuador, Sistema, Venezuela, Petro, Sweden, e-krona. Apart from that, recently in the year 2020, the Chinese central bank has decided to launch its own central bank digital currency. Its name is Digital Currency Electronic Payment. It has been launched in a pilot mode and it is basically a retail central bank digital currency, which means it can be used by the people for settling various kinds of transactions. Presently, this particular currency has been programmed to operate in only 4 Chinese cities. So this is basically yet in the experimental stage. So based upon its success, the Chinese central bank may then decide to launch a full-fledged central bank digital currency. In that particular case, the central bank digital currency launched by China could well emerge as a major challenge to the existing paper-based dollar. So in future, we can probably see a war between the digital yuan of China versus the paper-based dollar. Nevertheless, keeping that aside, let us look at the various benefits associated with the central bank digital currency. So these benefits are self-evident. These benefits include they promote cashless society, promote financial inclusion. They would help in increasing the effectiveness of the monetary policy since the RBI would be able to trace all the transactions. It would also give a push to the development of the fintech sector. So in future, if we are able to launch the digital rupee, then a large number of fintech companies such as Paytm, PhonePe, Google Pay, etc., they may come up with their own apps. So through these apps, we would be able to do various transactions in terms of digital rupee. So this in a way would give a boost to the fintech sector. Nextly, it would be able to provide a real-time picture of the economic activity. Hence, this would enable us to come out with a better GDP estimates. We would be able to trace all the transactions, which in turn would enable various enforcement agencies to crack down on corruption, money laundering, etc. And lastly, we would be able to counter the monopoly which would be otherwise created by the private sector issued cryptocurrencies. So, in case of India, as highlighted before, already the Subhash Chandra Garg committee has given recommendations in the year 2019. This particular committee has recommended that we need to ban the private cryptocurrencies and in its place issue a central bank digital currency. Not just Subhash Chandra Garg committee, in fact the draft national blockchain strategy has also given recommendations to issue the central bank digital rupee in India. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to central bank digital currency. Apart from that, I hope you must have understood the concept of the legal tender. Please do let us know in the comment section as to whether the checks and the demand drafts, whether they are considered to be the legal tender or the non-legal tender. The next article appears on page number 7. The title of the article here is China is still the largest source of the critical imports into India. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian economy. The government of India has come up with the concept of the Atmanirbhar Bharat. The objective behind the Atmanirbhar Bharat is multifold. First and foremost, the government through the Atmanirbhar Bharat seeks to promote the domestic manufacturing. Secondly, it would want to reduce the import of the non-critical goods into the Indian economy. Thirdly, it would want to create more amount of employment opportunities. So, in a way, we are trying to ensure that the Indian economy remains self-sufficient. However, the nature of bilateral trade between India and China is considered to be a major challenge or a constraint to achieving a Atmanirbhar Bharat. Accordingly, this particular article highlights that a multi-pronged strategy has to be adopted in order to ensure Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, based upon our discussion, a main question for your practice here could be the bilateral trade between India and China is considered to be a major impediment to the Atmanirbhar Bharat. In the light of this particular statement, discuss various strategies to decouple the Indian economy from the Chinese economy. Now, if you have a look at the bilateral trade between India and China in the year 2020, in terms of volume, the total bilateral trade was more than $85 billion. In order to understand the nature of bilateral trade between India and China, we would have to look at the Economic Survey 2020-21, which was recently published by the Indian government. In volume 2 of the Economic Survey, we have a separate chapter titled as the External Sector. Now, this particular chapter gives a bird's eye view of India's international trade with various countries. In particular, if you have a look at table 3, this particular table highlights India's merchandise trade balance with the major countries. And as you can see, among the major countries, India has a major trade imbalance with China. During the period April to November 2020-21, India's exports to China was almost around $13 billion. However, our imports from China, this was as high as around $38 billion. So in the year 2020, between the months of April to November, we had a net trade deficit of almost around $25 billion. Apart from that, China is the second major export destination for India after USA. In terms of imports, China is the third major country for the source of imports. Please do let us know in the comment section as to which country is the top source of imports into the Indian economy. You can get to know this from the economic survey. But coming to the most important question, that is, why is the bilateral trade between India and China considered as a major challenge to the Atmanirbhar Bharat? First and foremost, as seen for the economic survey, India has a higher trade deficit with China. So this obviously leads to the loss of forex reserves. Secondly, in the recent years, we have seen a large scale entry of the cheaper Chinese goods into the Indian economy. The entry of these cheaper Chinese goods not only affect the domestic manufacturing, but they also affect the job creation in the Indian economy. Thirdly, as you can see in this particular graph here, India is critically dependent upon China for the import of major raw materials. Now, for example, Chinese share in India's imports of electronics goods, this is as high as around 45%. In particular, the Chinese mobile phones alone account for 72% of the mobile market in India. Similarly, if you look at the pharmaceutical industry in case of India, India is considered to be the pharmacy of the world. However, the Indian pharmaceutical industries are critically dependent upon China for the import of the active pharmaceutical ingredients. The import of APIs from China alone account for almost around 65 to 70 percentage. So this clearly shows that our ability to manufacture the pharmaceutical drugs at a lower price is critically dependent upon the import of these active pharmaceutical ingredients from China. If China stops exporting the APIs to Indian economy, the Indian pharmaceutical industry would get adversely affected. So, in a way, there is over dependence on the Chinese economy for the import of certain critical raw materials. If you don't import these raw materials, the production costs in the Indian economy would increase, and this will also have an adverse impact on the job creation. So, what strategies should be adopted in order to decouple the Indian economy from the Chinese economy and ensure the self-reliant India? First and foremost, we would have to attract the multinational companies from China. Now, we all know that China has become a global manufacturing hub by attracting huge amount of foreign direct investment. A large number of multinational companies such as Apple, Samsung, etc., they have established their base in China. Now, post the COVID-19, there has been growing anti-China sentiment. Apart from that, the trade war between US and China is making the export from China uncompetitive. Hence, India has to leverage this particular opportunity. It has to attract the multinational companies from China. It has to give due incentives to these MNCs to establish their base in India. So, what can be done in order to attract those MNCs? First and foremost, see, if you look at the idea of special economic zones, SEZs, they are basically set up in order to boost the exports from an economy. In particular, the SEZs in China have been extremely successful. Take for instance Shenzhen. Now Shenzhen, when it was initially established as an SEZ almost 20 to 25 years back, it was a small fishing village. But now if you look at Shenzhen, Shenzhen is considered to be one of the largest city in the universe. Shenzhen has been able to attract a large number of foreign companies. A large number of foreign companies have set up their manufacturing base in Shenzhen. So even India has set up SEZs in order to boost the domestic manufacturing. But the problem here is most of the SEZs in case of India, they are located in the interior parts rather than being located along the coast. Now this goes against the basic idea of SEZs, which is to export the goods. So if you have to export the goods, the best place to set up SEZs is along the coast, which precisely China has done. In fact, the Baba Kalyani Committee on SEZs has given a very important recommendation that India has to focus upon setting up of the SEZs along the coastal areas in order to boost the domestic manufacturing. If the SEZs are set up along the coastal areas, then it would become quite easier for the multinational companies to export goods from the Indian economy. Secondly, if you see, presently in case of India, the land acquisition is considered to be highly cumbersome as well as time consuming. That is why a large number of multinational companies have been reluctant to move their base to India. In order to avoid this particular problem, we would have to focus upon the plug and play model. See, as part of the plug and play model, the governments acquire the land on behalf of the industries. Once the land is acquired, necessary infrastructure such as roads, buildings, electricity connection, water connection, all that necessary infrastructure is created by the government itself. Now, this land, along with the necessary infrastructure, can then be given to the private sector. So, the private sector need not acquire the land, the private sector can immediately come and start manufacturing in the Indian economy. In fact, some of the states such as Maharashtra, Haryana, etc., have already come up with the policies in order to ensure the plug and play model. So, what we have to do here is we would have to replicate these policies at an all India level. Thirdly, I hope all of you must be aware the Indian government has come up with a scheme known as a production linked incentive scheme. As part of this particular scheme, financial incentives are provided to the industries based in India, and this incentives is in turn dependent upon their overall production. So as they increase their production, they would be able to get more amount of the incentives. So going forward, we need to ensure proper implementation of this particular scheme. Secondly, in order to avoid the import of the Chinese goods into the Indian economy, obviously we would have to increase the customs duty. However, if you suddenly increase the customs duty by a larger margin, then this would have an adverse impact on the domestic manufacturing. So the best way forward here is we should start increasing the customs duty in a phased manner. So if we start increasing the customs duty in a phased manner, this would give adequate amount of time to the domestic manufacturing to reduce their reliance on the import of the Chinese goods. They can start manufacturing these goods in the Indian economy rather than being dependent upon China. Nextly, see, almost one third of the Chinese goods that we import into the Indian economy are actually low technology goods. Some of these low technology goods includes toys, cosmetics, fabrics, etc. So there is no need to import these goods from China. Rather, we can substitute these low technology Chinese goods with the domestic goods. So we would have to identify all those low technology goods which we are importing from China and try to promote our own domestic manufacturing. Nextly, see, in the DNS dated 7th of September 2020, I have discussed in much greater detail about the global value chains. In particular, I have discussed as to how would Indian economy get benefited by getting integrated into global value chains. According to Economic Survey 2019-20, if Indian economy gets integrated into global value chains, we would be able to create 4 crore jobs by the end of 2025 and almost around 8 crore jobs by the end of 2030. And lastly, we would have to start finding alternatives to the Chinese goods. And this can possibly be done by signing the free trade agreements with the other countries. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article.
The next news to be discussed appears on page number 11 in the FAQ section. It says Google exit threat. Why is the search engine giant irked with the Australian government's proposed law on payments? Now you should see this particular news with respect to tech giants versus a national government, as this news highlights that the Australian government has framed a bill or a legislation, namely the Treasury Laws Amendment News Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code Bill 2020, and it is expected to be introduced in the Australian Parliament. Now, the issue here is that this Australian law aims to force these tech giants, namely Google and Facebook, to pay news organizations for their journalism. However, this law has been opposed tooth and nail both by Google and Facebook. And in their opposition, Facebook has threatened to block Australian news content, whereas Google has threatened to shut down its search engine in Australia, just like what it did in China and Spain. Now, this particular law has been introduced by Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, as the Australian government had asked the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission to draft a mandatory code of conduct. Now, this draft is important because it addresses the bargaining power imbalances which currently exist between the tech giants or the digital platforms which the tech giants offer and between the Australian news media businesses. So, this is what this particular news highlights, and here let us understand the need for introduction of such law and the impact which such a legislation may have on these tech giants. Now, this mandatory bargaining code highlights that it is important to correct the imbalances between the tech giants and independent news media organizations of Australia so that this bill enables and strengthens independent media, which is essential for a well functioning and healthy democracy. Now, this aspect also becomes important from the perspective of Indian context, as the role of media, even in India, has come under various concerns and criticisms. Now, basically, this law aims to maintain or strengthen fair payment mechanism for news publishers for their content. However, this is being opposed by tech giants such as Google and Facebook. Now, according to this draft code, it mandates Google and Facebook to have commercial agreements with every news organization. And this is what is being opposed by Google and Facebook. As according to Google, it is almost impossible to enter into commercial agreement with every news organizations, as Google says that it will become almost unworkable. The draft code further allows news media businesses to bargain individually and also collectively with Google and Facebook. And this bargaining capacity has been provided by the Australian law regarding inclusion of news on their platform. So basically, this draft code actually addresses the power imbalances, especially with respect to negotiations of a fair payment mechanism. Now, this draft code also provides for a set of minimum standards. Now, according to this set of minimum standards, advance notice must be given to news organizations, especially if these tech giants, namely Google or Facebook, changes the algorithm ranking. Now, we all know that news presentation on any platform, say for example YouTube, Google, or even Facebook, it is based on certain algorithm. And if there are changes in this particular algorithm, then the news presentation or the news feeds which you see on YouTube or Google changes. So, this minimum standard highlights that if Google changes its algorithm ranking or if Google changes the presentation of news, then such change in algorithm ranking or presentation of news must be told in advance to the news organizations. The code further provides for recognizing original news content which is provided by these news organizations. The minimum standards also force Google and Facebook to provide information regarding how and when Facebook or Google makes available these users' data which is collected through users' interaction with news content. So these are certain set of minimum standards which has been imposed through the draft code which will be introduced shortly in Australian Parliament. So the question is that how will this code help publishers or news organizations? Now this particular code will give news organizations power to negotiate at par with the tech giants, namely Google and Facebook. Now, this code also mandates that in case of any disagreements between news organization or publishers and the tech giants, then an arbitral panel can be set up, and this arbitral panel will select between the two final offers made by arbitrating parties, namely Google or Facebook and the news organizations or publishers. Now, regarding change in algorithms, these tech giants, namely Google and Facebook, will have to give 14 days prior notice to these news publishers or news organization. And this becomes a very important aspect of this code because changes in algorithms have significant impact on referral traffic, and these changes in referral traffic about different news also impact business of news organizations and publishers. So this is how the code will help publishers in providing an equal platform to negotiate with these big tech giants. Now, Google has obviously criticized this move of Australian government mainly on two aspects. Number one is regarding the arbitral panel, which has the power to select one of the two final offers made by the arbitrating parties. And the second point criticized by Google is regarding change in algorithms and also giving advance 14 days prior notice to the publishers or news organizations. So, considering these criticisms by Google, it is yet to be seen whether Google actually shuts its shop in Australia. Now, as an alternative, Google has come up with this new product, namely the Google News Showcase. Now, this is a licensing agreement with publishers, and the aim is to pay publishers to create and curate high quality content which becomes useful for the readers, as it also features editorial curation of award winning newsrooms, as it will give more insight into the stories for the readers. So let's see how Google News Showcase develops in coming times, as Google intends to spend $1 billion on this particular product. Now it's important to understand the backdrop to this news, because this news basically highlights about big tech versus national governments. Now it is possible that different countries may also enact such a code, including India, in times to come. So, on this note, it's important to understand the relation between national governments and these tech giants, as these tech giants are slowly becoming the new oligarchs. So, from our examination point of view, this news must be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 3, especially regarding role of media and social networking sites in internal security challenges. With this news analysis, let's move to the next news discussion. The next news to be discussed also appears as a FAQ on page number 11. The news highlights: what does green tax mean for vehicle owners? Will the government proposal help to achieve the clean air objective? When is it scheduled to come into force? So, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has approved to levy green tax on old vehicles which are polluting the environment. And the proposal to impose green tax will go to the states for consultation before it is formally notified. Now, this topic of green tax becomes important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains examination. In your prelims, this topic gets covered under Indian economy as well as environment, whereas in your mains, this gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically with respect to conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, and also infrastructure, especially roads. Now, according to the government, the main principles which are to be followed while levying green tax are the following. It says that transport vehicles older than 8 years could be charged green tax at a time of renewal of fitness certificate, and the rate at which green tax for such vehicle will be charged will be 10 to 25% of road tax. Next, it mentions about personal vehicles. It says that green tax can also be imposed on personal vehicles at the time of renewal of registration certificate after 15 years. So it makes a distinction between transport vehicles and personal vehicles. For transport vehicles, after 8 years, when renewal of fitness certificate is applied for, then after 8 years, green tax will be imposed on transport vehicles. Whereas on personal vehicles, after 15 years has elapsed, at the time of renewal of registration certificate, a green tax will be imposed on personal vehicles. However, the government aims to impose lower green tax for public transport vehicles such as city buses. Next, the government aims to impose higher green tax, which can be as high as 50% of road tax for such vehicles which are registered in highly polluted cities. And in this, you can definitely count Delhi, as Delhi has been one of the polluted cities of India. The policy next talks about differential tax system. It says that depending on the fuel, namely petrol or diesel, and the type of vehicle, a differential tax system can be applied regarding imposing green tax. It further mentions that vehicles like strong hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and vehicles using alternate fuels like CNG, ethanol, LPG, etc. will be exempted from green tax. The policy further says that vehicles used in farming, such as tractors, harvesters, etc., will also be exempted. Now, the revenue collected from these green tax will be kept in a separate account of the government, and such an account will be used for tackling pollution and will also be distributed with states so that states can set up state of art facilities for emission monitoring. So, according to the Union Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, these are the different types of green taxes which the government aims to impose in the near future. So the question is that what can be the possible benefits of green tax? Number one, it can help to dissuade people from using vehicles which damage the environment. Second, to motivate people to switch to newer and lesser polluting vehicles. And third, green tax will reduce pollution level and make the polluter pay for polluting the environment. So these three can be said to be the benefits regarding imposing green tax by the government on old vehicles. However, the question which actually arises is that will imposing green tax on different kind of old vehicles actually help? Now here Niti Aayog has expressed certain reservations regarding green tax. So far, we have seen no compulsion on the vehicle owners to retire their vehicle or leave their vehicle. So the problem here is that continued operation of such vehicle will further pollute the environment more, as these old vehicles, especially using diesel, will pollute more. Now another concern highlighted is that the amount collected through green tax, will such an amount be able to compensate for the greater pollution caused because of these vehicles? Now these are larger questions which still needs to be addressed. So, based on these concerns, there is an opinion to tweak or amend the policy pertaining to green tax. Now, this new policy mentions about a Green New Deal, which will basically provide financial options such as loans and grants for commercial transport vehicles, as it will encourage the small operators of these commercial transport vehicles to scrap old vehicles. Now the question is that why will they scrap old vehicles? Because the government will slowly escalate or increase green tax annually. And this escalation of green tax on an annual basis will, in a way, sort of provide certain nudge effect for these commercial transport owners to go for the financial option provided by the government through loans or grants. And similar aspect of financial option will then be provided to bus companies and then to auto rickshaw owners. Now the stimulus provided to bus companies will help in adding new fleet and will also overall reduce emissions. And for auto rickshaw owners, grants or loans will be provided at low interest so that the auto rickshaw owners are able to move to electric vehicles. Now all these will actually help in reducing pollution in the environment. Now, another important point to be understood is regarding the policy of deregistration and scrapping of old vehicles. Now, as of now, the government has approved this policy of deregistration and scrapping of old vehicles owned by government department and PSUs which are 15 years in age. That is, such vehicles which are 15 years old. Now, this policy of deregistration and scrapping will be notified and it will come into effect from 1st April 2022. And this policy of deregistration and scrapping as of now will be only applicable on vehicles owned by government departments and PSUs which are above 15 years in age. Now, so far, the government has not said anything regarding deregistration or scrapping of vehicles policy for commercial and private vehicles. So, let's see whether the government intends to bring this aspect of scrapping of vehicles regarding personal vehicles. Now, another important fact which you must know is that commercial vehicles comprise of around 5%. However, it accounts for vehicular pollution which is close to around 65 to 70%. Now, regarding older vehicles, that is older fleet which is registered before the year 2018, it comprises of less than 1%. However, such vehicles causes 15% of the pollution, and as compared to modern vehicles, they pollute 10 to 25 times. So because of these aspects, the government in future may think of applying this aspect of scrapping of vehicle policy even to personal and commercial vehicles. Now, as of now, this policy of green tax has been proposed. Let's wait for its final outcome. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. The question is, which of the following can be said to be the problems associated with private cryptocurrencies? Options are: first, volatility; second, security risk; and third, economic instability. So the question is, select the correct answer using the code given below. Options are A, 2 and 3 only, B, 1 and 2 only, C, 2 only, and D, 1, 2 and 3. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements about Economic Survey of 2020-21. Options were: first, it is released by Department of Expenditure under Ministry of Finance. No, this statement is incorrect, as it is released by Department of Economic Affairs. Second, it has slammed credit rating agencies' methodology, which has undermined India's sovereign credit rating. Yes, this statement is correct. So the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So the correct answer is B, that is 2 only. With this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.